On today's Palace of Pistons podcast, the Detroit Pistons have gone streaking. The Pistons enter the NBA All-Star break on a 4-game winning streak. We talk about that. We talk about the improved play of Ausar Thompson. Are we concerned with Dennis Schroder after a slow start as a Detroit Piston? All of that and more on this week's edition of the Palace of Pistons podcast, brought to you by Bleed.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another exciting night of NBA basketball.
The Pistons are digging in. They got the depth. They got the big men. They got the better basketball team. No doubt about it.
Pistons need a three, and they have just under 3 seconds to do it. Here's Chauncey Billups. Here it is. He's got it. He's got it. Chauncey Billups hits the three. Overtime. Amazing.
Out of bounds. Detroit basketball.
Pistons fans, hello and welcome back to another edition of the Palace of Pistons podcast, brought to you by Bleed. Myself, Aaron Johnson, and joining me this week is Jasper Apollonia. Jasper, the Pistons heading into the All-Star break on a 4-game win streak. The momentum, the vibes are high with the Detroit Pistons, my friend. We've got a great show planned today.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun watching the Pistons over the last few games. Even a tough couple losses were still pretty entertaining up until the very last second. But Detroit has just been one of the most fun, entertaining, and just good teams in the NBA over the last couple of weeks. I'm excited to break it down with you. Thank you again to anybody who joined us on playback 2 nights ago with the Pistons' last game before the All-Star break against the Chicago Bulls. That was a lot of fun. We hope more of you will join us in the future. Thank you to everyone who contributed in the chat. We're going to do a lot more of those, I think, in the future. But Aaron, there is so much to talk about with the Detroit Pistons as they go into the All-Star break. Best record since 2008, 2009. And there is a lot of optimism coming out of the All-Star break as well, isn't there?
There is. There's a lot to cover with how the Pistons have played as of late. And we're going to go into the winning streak that the Pistons are on. We're going to talk about really just how this team has evolved as the season has progressed, and particularly at the start, at the flip of the new calendar year. So I'm really excited to get into that and go through all that. But before we do that, I want to give a word to our weekly sponsor, and that's BetOnline. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform, your number one source for online betting in 2025. Whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, BetOnline is your ultimate game day companion. A large selection of odds on everything from NBA and college basketball to the NHL and UFC. BetOnline continues to be your number one sports betting source. Every three-pointer to hat trick, BetOnline has you covered with odds, stats, and more for every game day, every play, and every win. BetOnline, the game starts here. Okay, so before we get into everything, wherever you're watching, wherever you're listening from, to be quick, 30 seconds, go hit the subscribe button. Go hit the follow button. Go leave us that 5-star review. Leave us that 5-star rating. Leave a like. Leave a comment. Let us know what you want us to talk about. Or as we talk through the show today, let us know your thoughts, as our faithful listeners always do in the YouTube comment section. Love to hear what everyone has to say. Without further ado, let's get into our first topic, and that is the Detroit Pistons playing winning basketball. 29-26. They are 3 games above 500, good for 6th in the Eastern Conference, and they're only 2 games of the 4th seed in the East. They have already more than doubled their win total from last season. And they have been doing all of this since 2025 without Jaden Ivey. Look, most recently it's a 4-game win streak for Detroit. Honestly, it could have even been better had they not lost a few games on game winners at the hands of Young and Darius Garland in the loss versus Atlanta and Cleveland. But nonetheless, Jasper, the Pistons are better than anyone could have ever anticipated. You'll hear that from the organization themselves, but what is going into this just great play from the Detroit Pistons?
I mean, I think it comes down to something that JB Bickerstaff, before the season even began, said at one of his press conferences, which is by the time February rolls around, you're going to be watching Detroit Pistons basketball. And that has certainly come true. They are playing Detroit Pistons basketball right now. And by that, I mean they're playing really good defense. It's not a secret. They are still, I believe, third in the NBA in defensive rating since over the past 15 games, something like that. Since February started at the very least, they are top 5. They are playing team basketball. Guys are passing all over the court. You saw it just 2 days ago against the Chicago Bulls. Jalen Duren, Ausar Thompson, Cade Cunningham, all with 5 or more assists. They are running up and down the floor. They're getting after it in transition. One of the best fast break teams in the NBA. They're starting to take care of the ball more. Their turnovers have dropped, and it's all starting with Cade Cunningham. And lastly, that's the guy. Cade Cunningham has taken a real leap, especially since Jaden Ivey has gone down. He's not the only one, though, Aaron. This team is just gelling. They have great chemistry. They are doing a really good job with their coaching staff, and players are stepping up all over the court. It's really hard to come up with any negatives about this team right now. That doesn't mean they don't have weaknesses. It doesn't mean they don't have issues. It doesn't mean that all these players that are performing well, that they are perfect. But as of right now, with the way that this team is constructed, it is hard to argue that they are not getting the absolute most from the sum of their parts. And a lot of that comes down to, like I said, JB Bickerstaff. What he's doing is pretty incredible. And not just with the Pistons. You have to remember, he did something very similar with the Cleveland Cavaliers. His first season, they won 22 games. His second season, they doubled their win total, 144. They are now 6 games away, the Detroit Pistons, from giving JB Bickerstaff his second team that he's taken over, and not only doubled their win total from the previous season, but also had them win 20 plus more games. It's pretty much a masterclass as of right now. And like I said, it's hard not to be extremely excited about them coming out of the All-Star break, even though the schedule is going to get harder. You look at what they've done so far this season, especially playing against the very, very difficult Western Conference. They've walked away from most of those matchups with wins. There's not a single game you can look at the rest of the schedule where you're just going to automatically mark it down as a loss. So I think for me, there's so many factors that go into the Pistons being where they are as of right now.
Since January 1st, the Pistons are 3rd in defensive rating. They are 13th in offensive rating. That's good for a top 10 rating across the entire league since the start of 2025. It is mind-boggling to me that JB Bickerstaff is not the favorite to win Coach of the Year. He has the 3rd best odds across essentially every sports book right now to win that award. And Kenny Atkinson is a very, very, very heavy favorite. So it's not like the lines are close. It doesn't look like it's a race at all. And it's just crazy to me because, and this is no disrespect to the Cleveland Cavaliers. It's no disrespect to Kenny Atkinson. They're having a phenomenal year. He's doing a phenomenal job with the Cavaliers. But Cleveland was already a good team. They were already a really good team in the Eastern Conference. He has done a good job with them. But to think about what JB Bickerstaff has done with a team that won 14 games last year, a team that is playing without what going into the season was arguably their 2nd best player, and with a team that made, some offseason additions, but they didn't add any sort of all-star or super big name. There was no max contract addition to the team. What is done in such a short of time, I can't believe he is not at least neck and neck in the running for Coach of the Year. Because, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I mean, this is a problem with the NBA, I think, in the way that things are prioritized fundamentally, where it's like winning the higher level you win matters more than like how well you perform on an individual basis sometimes. You know what I mean? Like we see it with players and like all-star selections. We saw it last year with Cade in terms of like the way that he was being looked at. I just think that like I agree with you. I think it's more impressive to take a historically bad team and turn them into a good team than it is to take a very good team and make them into a great team. Perhaps not historically great even. Like if it was like a Steve Kerr situation where he's taking over the Warriors and turning them into the Warriors, that's a different situation. I mean, is Cleveland even... I mean, of course they're a title favorite, but like, I don't think they would even be my top 2 team in there. So I don't know. For me, I agree with you, Aaron. I think it should be JB Bickerstaff. What he's doing to me is way harder and way more impressive.
It's absolutely way harder. I mean, this was a team that won 14 games last season. It's the middle of February, and they've already more than doubled their win total. What they've done record-wise has to be up there for one of the most significant improvements in league history in terms of the record from the previous season to the year after. The Pistons could very much end up with over 40 wins. I mean, again, they won 14 games last year, guys. This team was horrible defensively. They were horrible offensively. And it's not just, hey, the Pistons added a bunch of big names and that changed their tides. No, a lot of what they've done has been internal development. We're going to talk about Ausar Thompson later. He has played an absolutely pivotal role in this turnaround. Look at what's going on with Jalen Duren as well. We were talking about this guy at the beginning of the season, saying what he's doing right now is going to get him lost in the shuffle of Detroit's core, and he could end up being a roster casualty sooner rather than later. He's completely flipped the conversation. Internal development. Cade Cunningham has taken a leap from a good young player into an all-star, into a top, 15, 20 player in the league. I mean, definitely top 20 this year. Is he inside the top 15? You look at the numbers, how his team's performing, they're winning. He's made a significant leap. JB Bickerstaff is doing that with a roster right now where it's Harris is this team's second best player. Their third best player is who? Malik Beasley? And maybe that was the case up until Thompson and Jalen Duren really picked things up. But still, Malik Beasley's had some phenomenal output this year. Think about when Cade was out against the 76ers last week. Beasley able to go off for 36 points. The Pistons play a team that has Joel Embiid, Paul George, and Tyrese Maxey all on court. Something really hasn't had much this year. And they play them without Cade Cunningham and still Jaden Ivey, and they win. This, to me, is just an absolute travesty that JB Bickerstaff has not gotten more recognition for this Coach of the Year award race.
Aaron, I want to even put that into further perspective. Like as of right now, if the Pistons were to win 43 games, that would be a 29 win improvement from last year. That would make them the 6th greatest improvement win total from year to year in NBA history. That would tie them with the Milwaukee Bucks of 1969-1970. Do you know who the Milwaukee Bucks added to their roster that year? Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. You look at the teams ahead of them in the greatest win totals in NBA history from season to season improvement. You're talking about the Boston Celtics, which added Larry Bird. You're talking about the Phoenix Suns adding Steve Nash. You're talking about the San Antonio Spurs adding Tim Duncan once and David Robinson another time. And then lastly, of course, the greatest season win total improvement in NBA history, the 07-08 Boston Celtics. They just added, 3 Hall of Famers to that roster. No big deal. Just a big one. And I don't know if you've noticed, there is a through line with all of those. They added superstars to their team. They added guys who were MVP, not just candidates, but MVP winners. Every single one of those teams I mentioned added an MVP to their roster. The Detroit Pistons have not. The Detroit Pistons added Tobias Harris, Malik Beasley, and Tim Hardaway Jr. this offseason, along with Ron Holland. So for me, when you look at that, there might end up being, this might not go down as the top 5 biggest win total improvement in NBA history. Might end up being 6th. But when you look at the margin of difficulty and the way that it's being done, I think to me, this is perhaps the single most impressive season-to-season turnaround in the history of this league. When you just look at internal development, adding small moves, changing a coaching staff, changing a philosophy, I genuinely think it's one of the most impressive turnarounds ever accomplished. So yeah, I think we're in total agreement. I think JB Bickerstaff for sure should be getting more conversation for Coach of the Year, because what he's doing is singularly impressive. This just does not happen. Like, I can't stress this enough. This does not happen in the NBA. It never has happened in the NBA unless you are adding a top 20 player of all time. And the Pistons did not do that. So yeah, man, we're in lockstep on this one, I think, Aaron. What they're doing is incredible. And I think it also speaks to the improvement of Cade Cunningham, where he was already on the roster, but he's taken that leap into perhaps not top 10 player of all time, but certainly into that all NBA discussion.
Yeah. Let's also talk about Ausar Thompson here too. I know this was something that you especially really wanted to talk about. And if you watched along on playback on Wednesday night, as we watched and talked over the Pistons and Bulls game, it was another great Ausar Thompson performance that we highlighted throughout the game consistently. It was led to some really interesting conversations with those who watched and chatted with us throughout the game. So make sure to go follow us and subscribe over at Playback. It's free. You'll be able to watch the game with us and chat with us as the games go on. But we talked about Ausar Thompson, who in the month of February, 7 games, just over 25 minutes played per game, averaging 14.6 points, 6.1 rebounds, and 4.4 assists per game. That goes along with over 2 steals a game. And he's doing it while shooting, just under 70% from the floor. Look, quite frankly, I did not think this Ausar Thompson leap was going to happen as all at once as it seemingly has. Like, the only thing that's not happening right now, he's not hitting 3-point shots, but he's doing everything else for the Detroit Pistons right now. I want to turn it over to you, Jasper, but I just have to say, Ausar Thompson, in the way that he's playing right now, has completely changed the trajectory of the Detroit Pistons. The impact he's making on both sides of the court. Emphasis on both sides of the court. Because last year it was clear that it was going to help Detroit defensively. But offensively, it was going to get a little bit dicey out there with him because of his limited ability to score, to play make, to find opportunities to impact the game on that side. But he is on both sides of the floor right now, greatly impacting the game of the Detroit Pistons, and their record and their statistics with him on the court are showing it.
I mean, Aaron, he's shooting 75% at the rim this year. 75%. Jalen Duren's basically shooting the same number at the rim this year, and Jalen Duren is just dunking everything. That's all they're asking him to do, dunks and offensive putbacks. What Ausar Thompson's doing right now is so impressive, and I've seen some people try and diminish what he's done the last couple games, especially because it's against the Chicago Bulls, which are, do not get me wrong, a total dumpster fire. They cannot defend the rim to save their lives right now. It was sad to see. But Ausar Thompson is just taking his game to a different level. He was incredible in the game that we did on Playback. I thought he was even better the night before. He had a couple plays that just had me. I mean, I got home pretty late at night. I had a couple drinks, and it was like 5 a.m. and I'm in my bedroom just like cackling, watching the game on replay, because what he's doing is so singularly spectacular. At least you would say it's singularly spectacular if he didn't have a brother that's doing as much, if not more, than he's doing as of right now. And
a little more.
A little bit more. Oh, you have to tip the cap to Ausar, to Amen. And like, look, we've always said this, like, Ausar is, I think, an all-star, potentially all-NBA, all-defensive potential kind of guy. I think Amen is like a top 7 player in the NBA type of guy. So anything anything good you can say about Amen is like not taking anything away from Ausar. But just the speed and the ease that he's able to get to the rim, that's always been there. But his passing, I think you've really seen take a step up in these last few contests, especially in the month of February. He's gotten so much more comfortable on the floor with the ball in his hands. Some of the reads he made last night, there was one where, and we should also talk about Jalen Duren's contributions because he's been tremendous lately as well. But Ausar Thompson got the dump off from Jalen Duren in the paint. The two-man game between them was absolutely sensational. First play of the game was a Duren lob to Ausar, and it pretty much did not let up since then. They built their lead going into halftime off the back of 3 straight possessions that ended in Jalen Duren or Ausar Thompson passing the ball to one another for an easy score. But there was one where Jalen Duren passed the ball to Ausar under the rim, and the speed in which Ausar kicked the ball out to Tobias Harris for the wide open 3 was, it's just special, man. It's one of those things where you really do need to watch the film because that's a special type of pass that only certain players could make. And when you add that with the athletic ability that he's showing on a nightly basis, I mean, his ability to just dunk the ball from a standing position to get into position for steals, to block. I mean, his steal percentage right now is just ridiculous. And you add that to the effort that he gives you every single night and the humility that he approaches the game with. He's a special, special talent, man. And I don't want people to disregard what he's doing when he's doing it against weaker competition, because frankly, that's what good players and good teams do. They beat up on bad competition. And that's what the Pistons are doing right now. And that's what their players are doing. Yeah, it's just really exciting to watch, man. And I think you're seeing how much Ausar and his growth can elevate the floor of this team. We've talked about him and Jalen Duren potentially being a problem from a spacing perspective. If neither of them can shoot at a high level, I think those games against the Bulls show that's not necessarily as much of an issue if Ausar Thompson is able to develop as a ball handler, as a cutter, and as a passer, as we are seeing him potentially be able to do.
I think what also brings to this team is his give a crap level is higher than maybe like anybody else's in the league. Like, he takes no plays off. He gives no feet of space across 90 feet. He will score and pick you up full court and hound you. Not just guide you up the court, but hound you. His effort is also intoxicating because when he is on the court, it's not just him that starts making more plays defense. It's other guys. It's Jalen Duren, who, you just talked about. Their two-man game is becoming a legitimate thing we have to talk about. The back and forth that those guys are starting to have is meaningful. And Jalen Duren has been spectacular. Playmaking just like Ausar Thompson's. It's something that, we've wondered, where are the Pistons going to get that additional playmaking without Jaden Ivey? And until they had Dennis Schroder, where were they going to get additional playmaking from outside of Cade Cunningham? They're really starting to get it now from Ausar Thompson and Jalen Duren. And I love that JB Bickerstaff has really continued to enforce and welcome Ausar Thompson, getting the ball in his hands, making him run offense, making him be a facilitator, distribute basketball. Because, it's a lot easier for teams when Ausar Thompson is off the ball in the corner to just leave him alone and not worry about him on that side of the court. But now the Pistons are involving him in so many more actions and putting the ball in his hands and allowing him to make decisions. And quite frankly, he's such a good athlete that if he wants to, he's going to get deep into the paint. And then he can either use his athleticism, reach over the top and score over his opponents, or he is smart enough and unselfish enough to find the open man. Everything that I'm seeing from Ausar Thompson and hoping that it continues out of the All-Star break.
And I want to talk about that two-man game a little bit more because I think it's really opening up the Pistons offense in a way that people perhaps didn't anticipate when Jaden Ivey went down. Look, when we get to the playoffs, there's a chance that there are going to be issues with that and teams are going to be able to defend it more easily. But I think with the way that the Pistons are playing and with their lineups, they have found an answer to the loss of Jaden Ivey from a playmaking perspective with those two guys. Basically, what they're doing is they're running pick and roll with Cade and Jalen Duren up at the top of the key. Cade is dumping it off early to Jalen Duren when he's high up in the paint. So then when Cade goes out to the three-point line, you have him, Tobias Harris, and Tim Hardaway Jr. spacing the floor. You have Tim Hardaway Jr. and Tobias Harris on the corners, Cade at the top of the key. You have three shooters that are all above league average that the defense has to account for. Now you have Jalen Duren 2 feet solidly in the paint. If you step up and meet him, he is going to be able to dump it off to a cutting Ausar Thompson and then be able to make that work however they are if you double up on him. If you don't and you give him space, he has the ability to dribble the ball to the rim and finish through contact or with his skill. Like, he does have more skill finishing at the rim than most bigs do. He's also crazy athletic. So if you go off too much and you have, a foot in the restricted area, congratulations, you've just given up an and one. So they're able to, offset the lack of Jaden Ivey's driving into the lane where they were able to dump off to Duren, dump off to Ausar. They're actually creating more spacing this way. So that's why you're seeing the offense open up, especially against teams like Chicago that can't defend the rim. Like, you saw it. They had absolutely no answer for that. And I'm really interested to see what happens when they go up against teams with better bigs, with two bigs. I'm thinking a team like the Milwaukee Bucks. Like, when you have Bobby Portis, who can play power forward, and Brook Lopez, and they like to run that drop action, are the Pistons going to be able to take advantage of that? Is Jalen Duren going to be able to still run that and be able to finish at the rim around through Brook Lopez, Bobby Portis, whoever it may be? Are they going to be able to kick it out to the shooters and make that work? It's something that could very well be a situation in a playoff matchup. It's very much not outside the realm of possibility. They have a 4-5 matchup and it's them versus the Bucks. So I think it's just really interesting, like, how not only Jalen Duren and Ausar Thompson are developing and making the Pistons offense work far better. The Pistons offense is also aiding in their development as passers, as creators, and as finishers. So it's been like this two-pronged thing that is really, really given the Pistons a lot more on the offensive end. And I'm really, really interested to see what does happen eventually if they do get Jaden Ivey back, because I don't think that they have to go away from this two-man game. I think they can continue to work this in different lineups with Jaden Ivey as well. Because, again, he's shown a lot of utility as a catch-and-shoot guy, even more than Cade, to be honest with you. So if they're staggering lineups, I don't see why they can't continue to make this work moving forward.
You kind of just answered where I was going. Like, does this feel sustainable? The Pistons come out of the All-Star break, and they get the Spurs, who, they're not in the playoffs right now in the Western Conference, but they're still a dangerous team. They just added De'Aaron Fox. They obviously have Victor Wembanyama. They have plans to be a good team sooner rather than later and might be able to make the season push post All-Star break. Then they get an Atlanta team who they just lost to on a buzzer beater, courtesy of Trae Young. And then they get the Clippers, the Celtics, the Nuggets. It's a tough first 5 games. And again, like most teams in the NBA, it's going to be a game every night. They've proved this year with playing down to teams that they should theoretically beat when they do face them. But a tough schedule for Detroit out of the break. They go into the All-Star break and they have Chicago back-to-back. They just played a Charlotte team with just about everybody on their roster out. Like, yes, they beat those teams, but it's going to get tougher for them out of the break. Does what they're doing right now feel sustainable? Can they continue to win games? And, like, this a legitimate team that has a legitimate shot at actually being they're only 2 games out of the 4th seed right now in the Eastern Conference. Do they have a legitimate shot at something like that?
Yeah, why not? when you look around the NBA, when you look around the East, why shouldn't they? It's not like Milwaukee. It's not like Indiana. I mean, the Heat, like, yeah, there's a chance you lose 2 more games and you end up as the 6th seed, but like they're 100% in the race there. You're totally right. The schedule does get a lot harder coming out of the All-Star break, but this team is also on the upswing right now, and they just added Dennis Schroder. I think, he hasn't been great so far for Detroit, but I think you have seen some positives in the way that they're able to run offense with their backup units with Cade off the floor. It's not a coincidence that Cade has played his lowest minutes since Jaden Ivey went down. Since Dennis Schroder arrived in Detroit, I anticipate that continuing. Like, I think he's going to be closer to that, like 34, 35 minute a night instead of like the 37, 38 minutes a night. I think that allows them to just rest him a little bit more. So yeah, I think this team absolutely is in contention from that. And frankly, I think if they get the right playoff matchup, like New York is a team that I look at them and I say, I don't see why the Pistons can't beat this squad. Like, Karl Anthony Towns is playing really, really well defensively this year, but I don't fear their rim protection necessarily. And I think that's a team that the Pistons could match up with quite well on the wings. Somebody like Ausar Thompson, Kid Cunningham, like if you want to switch on to Jalen Brunson, Pistons have a pretty good team for that. And where New York usually wins on the wings because they have really good rebounding wings, good defenders who can switch, who can create problems offensively, Pistons kind of have good matchups for them. So I don't fear New York. I would not mind being the 6th seed. I will tell you that much. I would not mind being the 6th seed and facing New York in the first round.
It does feel like what Detroit's doing is sustainable. I think, how they come out of the break is going to be a huge test for this team. There are some games that they need to win. Like, if you start looking at the schedule and game Detroit needs to win, they need to beat San Antonio. They need to beat Atlanta because then they get the Clippers, the Celtics, and the Nuggets. And those are 3 very, very, very good teams. So you need to start stacking the wins where you can get them. The momentum is in their hands. They've won 4 in a row. They are getting a lot of national recognition for the success that they're having right now. They control their own destiny. And to their also benefit, the rest of the Eastern Conference beneath them is just not all that good. Chicago, who's the 10th seed, is heading in the absolute worst direction. Atlanta's 26-29. They're 4-6 in their last 10. The Heat are in the boat, 4-6 in their last 10. They are probably just going to end up being a play-in team by default because of the bottom half of the conference is so bad. Orlando also 4-6 in their last 10. They're behind Detroit in 7th in the East. It's not like these teams behind them are putting a ton of pressure on Detroit. But the Pistons do need to come out of the break strong to give me that confidence that, they're a threat to not just make the playoffs, but also like compete in the playoffs. The last 2 times the Pistons made the playoffs, it's been 4-game sweeps, and they haven't really played any competitive games. So they're trending in the right direction. They have the momentum. I do think what they're doing is sustainable, and it helps that they just added a ball handler to this roster, which is something that they very, very, very much needed. The trade line. Let's talk about him now. Let's talk about Dennis Schroder, who, even though the Pistons have won every game that he's played in, he kind of struggled since coming to the Pistons, at least scoring-wise. In 3 games, under 6 points a game, he's shooting 26% from the field, 37.5% from the three-point line on minimal attempts. Very, 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 very small sample size. I'll say this. I'm not concerned with Dennis Schroder whatsoever because I still think he's had a rather positive impact on the team despite his, individual stats not being all that great, although he is averaging just under 4 assists in a lower number of minutes than he's used to this year. So I'm concerned about it at all, but I know some people are like, the Pistons really traded for Dennis Schroder, and he's not helping them. I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
I'm not concerned about it whatsoever. I just look at how much more competent the Pistons backup unit has looked offensively since they acquired Dennis Schroder. Like, I know that they've faced the Chicago Bulls twice, but even that being said, like, they have done a good job of scoring. Their offensive rating with him on the court right now, again, really, really small sample size, but 115. And that's what you expect. Like, you expect them to just have like an average-ish NBA offense when he's on the court. And before he got there, the Pistons, without Cade Cunningham on the floor, had a 95 offensive rating. So when I look at this, like, immediately you can just see in pick and roll actions, especially, like, they had nobody who could run pick and roll before they got Schroder on the team. They're running pick and roll with their backup units now. Isaiah Stewart, you saw him score at the rim a few times the last couple nights. It's just making things a lot easier for them offensively, and defensively they're still really, really good. There's, in my opinion, not much of a drop off from Marcus Sasser to Dennis Schroder defensively. And we also saw like what Schroder brings to the team in terms of his hustle. He had that play in the first Chicago game where he literally threw himself across half court to save the ball, and then managed to, after the Isaiah threw the ball away again, sprint all the way down to the end of the court, tip the ball out of, I would assume, his hands, tip it back into him to save the ball for the Pistons. And that was his first game playing for Detroit. So I think when you see that, like, I think he's a good fit chemistry-wise. He's already talked about how good the chemistry is in Detroit. I anticipate him being a total positive for this team moving forward. Like, the numbers will stabilize. And even if his numbers aren't great for the rest of the year, it really won't matter because his effect on the offense will be felt. It will be seen. So, no, not worried about Schroder at all. Are you?
Yeah, I'm not either. I mean, look, you know, I said it on the playback last night, but the Pistons had an all-bench lineup on the court. It was Schroder, Malik Beasley, Isaiah Stewart,
and Tech.
Tech. Yeah, it was an all-bench lineup, and it was like, think about all the battles that we had last year. Think about all the time we spent on the podcast last year talking about the Pistons got to get away from these five-man bench lineup groups. They make no sense. It's so I'm thinking I'm losing my words, but it's so archaic to use these five-man bench lineups. They get killed every night. And now this year, with the addition of Dennis Schroder, but even really before that, although Marcus Sasser minutes were always a concern for me, but especially since they've added Dennis Schroder, five-man bench units, just I don't even blink an eye at them because they're not bad. So Dennis is going to continue to get graded in the team. You know, he's definitely not trying to force anything right now. It feels like he's really trying to set other guys up. I'm not worried about the shooting right now. That's going to come. He's going to play a bigger role on this team as well as the season progresses. We saw it a little bit more in that second game against Chicago as well, where Jay Bickerstaff put him on the floor alongside Cade Cunningham. It's something that both he and Trajan Langdon have said is a plan for them. They're not just going to use Dennis Schroeder, you know, the bench unit's point guard. They are going to put him on the floor with the starting group alongside Cade Cunningham. So I'm not worried about shooting in the first couple of games. He's still done a really good job running the offense, setting guys up, making impactful plays. And, you know, he's not a great defender, stretch means, but he's definitely an upgrade over Marcus Sasser, and he has that experience. He has the playoff experience that I think the Pistons should continue to look at because their core guys are all very, very young and don't have that experience. So, no, I'm not worried about it at all. I will say this kind of leads into where the last real main discussion that I wanted to bring on the show today. And Trajan Langdon was on 97.1 earlier this week, right at the beginning of the week, I believe. And they were talking about Jaden Ivey. He was talking about Jaden Ivey and going over the update on Jaden Ivey that the team sent out. That is that Ivey's in a walking boot right now. He's doing some lightweight marrying activities, and there's going to be another update in about 4 weeks. So we're not getting another update on Ivey until the first or second week of March. That leaves from the second week of March about a month left in the regular season. Langdon was on 97.1, essentially said, you know, they're not going to rush him back. They want to put him in an where he can continue to rehab and get better and get stronger. And, you know, they'd love to have him, but they're not pressuring him to come back. Does bringing in Dennis Schroder and seeing how the team has continued to find different ways to win, does that? I don't want to say, does that make you like not want Jaden Ivey to come back? Because I think you're insane if you think the Pistons should want Jaden Ivey back because of what he brings to the table. But would it make you feel any better if he did come back this year? If they played it safe or he just wasn't there in his recovery to come back this year? Not that he's not coming back. We haven't been told one way or the other. Like I said, you get another update at the beginning of March or second week of March. There's still a whole nother month in the regular season left. By the time that next update comes, he can be out of that walking boot. He could be doing some on-court activities. There's, still a chance that he's back this year, but would you be, how bad would it be if he doesn't come back, considering, hey, the Pistons have been able to win without him. They just added a ball handler that they really needed in Schroder.
Well, I mean, he'll be out of that walking boot before the 4-week update comes. Like, if you're broken your leg, he's already been in a walking boot. He's not going to be in a walking boot for 8 weeks. That's ridiculous. But I mean, unless, I don't know, it's even worse than we thought. But I'd be shocked if he was. It sounds to me like if he is going to be back, it's going to be right before the end of the regular season, like right before the playoffs. We'll see. I don't know if he'll be ready. I mean, it's still going to be, he's going to have to build the strength back in his leg. I don't know if he's going to be able to do that in the time frame that he's going to have. So I really don't know. We do really just have to wait and see. That being said, no, I want Jaden Ivey back. I don't think it will mess with team chemistry in any way. I think it will just make them better if they have a Jaden Ivey that's able to be explosive and or shoot the way that he was shooting before he went down. I think their team defense is good enough to more than make up for his still continued deficiencies at that end. And I think what he brings them offensively can only help. Adding Schroder to the mix there doesn't make it worse. It just makes it better. So for me, I'm totally fine with it. Like, I want Jaden Ivey back. I hope they can get him back. It does sound, though, like it's going to be right before the end of the regular season if they do, though. So it remains to be seen. I'm pretty I think it's like a 70-30 chance he misses the rest of the season at this point.
It's the other talking point there is if it is, that second week of April, that last week of the regular season that he's good to go, and the Pistons are in the thick of a playoff race. Do they think it's worth reintegrating him right come the playoffs? It's worth taking.
It all depends on how strong his leg is, because he is going to lose muscle. Even with physical therapy, he's going to lose muscle. He's going to lose explosiveness. It's just inevitable. So it's all going to come down to how quickly he can get out of that walking boot and get back onto the court. Because if he can get, 3 weeks of on-court, 2 weeks of on-court training before he comes back, and then they have 2 weeks of the regular season left and he's getting a month of his legs underneath him, I think you can make that work. I think you can. I think that's enough time. I'm no Arnie Kander, but based on my personal experiences, I think that's probably enough time.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you get an update, the first week of March and the updates that Ivey's, returning to practice, doing on-court activities, and, they're going to send out another update in a week or two, that would be reassuring in the standpoint, okay, there's enough time to get him back, to let him work some rust off, to figure out how he fits into the current rotation, what he's going to be able to do well right now as he gets his legs under him, what he can help the team with. Because, I mean, that's the thing. If they can get Jaden Ivey back, they definitely need him. They still need another guy that can put pressure on the rim, but also space the floor. You talked about, when we were talking about Ausar Thompson, Jalen earlier, you talked about teams maybe being able to figure out some things to stop them and hurt the offensive flow the Pistons are seemingly creating right now, because they're going to have, they're going to have 2 non-floor spacers out there and putting the ball in their hands. This would give you another ball handler, would give you a downhill attacker that can finish at the rim but can also shoot. A high energy guy, fits with Detroit's desire to run the floor. That's when they are their best offensively, is when they can get out, use their athletes, and beat everyone else down the court. He certainly helps with that. So, yeah, I think they definitely should want Jaden Ivey back. I think they'd love to get a look at him and Cade Cunningham together in a playoff ecosystem and how that looks. I mean, Jaden Ivey is contract extension eligible this summer, so I'm sure the Pistons and him would both love to be back this year. So,
especially in a playoff run, because one of the biggest questions I think surrounding Jaden Ivey, Cade Cunningham as a pairing is, can Jaden Ivey succeed in a playoff atmosphere when teams are going to go at your weakest defender? And he's going to be that regardless of who else is in the lineup for Detroit. So I think that's like an important thing they should want to figure out this before this offseason, before they get into extension talks. And I will lastly say this, I'll play a little devil's advocate, even though I'm the one who said, I'm not worried about it. Here's the potential pitfall. If he does come back and you fit him into the starting lineup, who comes out? Who comes out? Tim Hardaway Jr. started every single game this year. And Ausar Thompson is developing so much that if you continue to see him continue to develop over this next month and a half, and he's playing even better, and he's such a good defender, like, what do you do with Jaden Ivey, I think, in that situation? Do you bring him off the bench? And if so, then, how are you playing those minutes with him and Cade and Schroder? And, like, how do you adjust those playoff rotations? I think that, like, that's a reason why I'm saying, like, I do think the one caveat to this is, like, how much time do you have to reintegrate him into the team, and how much can you play him when you do that? So those are my concerns about a Jaden Ivey return to the lineup this year.
Yeah, I mean, I think when he comes back would also play a factor, and does he get back in the starting lineup? It feels like it's going to be one of those situations where he probably returns and is on some sort of a minutes restriction, and maybe just allows them to bring him in off the bench, at least at first. But again, if he's coming back with a week left in the season, there's no time to fully reintegrate him. You probably have to solely bring him off the bench just for the team's sake at that point. But if there's a left, he's coming back, or 3 weeks left, you can give him that week or two to come off the bench and see, what's working, what's not working, how's he performing, and, maybe tinker some lineup here or there. I think that is a really interesting question, though, because if Jaden Ivey does come back and he does this lineup, who loses their spot? Yeah, it'd be hard for me to look at Ausar Thompson and the way he's playing right now and say, we're putting you back to the bench. I think it's much easier to say, Tim Hardaway, we've appreciated everything you've done this year, but we've got to put Jaden Ivey in the starting up. But I also know that Jimmy Bickerstaff's a very old-fashioned coach and loves sticking with his guys and loves sticking with his lineups. And, yeah, I just don't know exactly how that would shake out.
Well, especially, and we continue to talk about it, like the Duren-Thompson two-man game and how it's elevating both of their respective play. Like, I don't think it's a coincidence that Jalen Duren is playing better right now. There is, I think, a legitimate question to be asked. Like, if it's Ivy and Cade out there, Jalen Duren is really only asked to be the roll man. That's all he's doing. That and, like, dribble handoff because you want to leave the space open for Ivy in the paint. And if now you're seeing his game open up more, like his passing abilities get unlocked, Ausar's passing abilities get unlocked, both of them as like finishers and playmakers, like being unlocked a little bit more. I think there's a question to be asked, like if Jaden Ivey comes back, does that regress Jalen Duren's game and by extension Ausar Thompson's game? This has just started and like it's already so good. Yeah, I mean, I think there's questions there, but overall, I want Ivy back. Yeah, I think ultimately you can make it work.
Yeah, I think the Pistons would love to have him back. Jaden Ivey would love to be back. We'll see. We're at least 3 weeks away from any sort of update from the Pistons on Ivy's future status anyway. So there's still a lot of time to go before that action becomes any sort of concern in the immediate.
Yeah, and it's his birthday today. So happy birthday, Jaden Ivey. I hope you're feeling good. 23, man. Jeez.
To be young again.
You're preaching to the choir, brother.
All right. This was a jam-packed podcast as we head into the All-Star break. Is there anything else you wanted to add before we wrap up and take a little break ourselves?
Yeah, I mean, hey, we talked about JB Bickerstaff should be in the running for Coach of the Year, should be higher up than he is. Let's also give a quick shout out to Malik Beasley, another guy who should be higher up in an awards race than I think he is right now for Sixth Man of the Year. He's just been so good this year, man. Just absolutely crucial. Broke the Pistons single season 3-point record. He has a decent shot at finishing top 10 all time in single season 3-pointers made. He could get to 300, man. It is on the table. So it'll be interesting to see if he can not just, add to Pistons history, but make it run at some real history too. That being said, Steph Curry with 401, I think you're okay. You're okay for another year.
All right, folks. Well, that's going to do it for this week's edition of the Palace of Pistons podcast, brought to you by Beef. Make sure you hit the subscribe button, the follow button, the like button, the heart button, all of the buttons. Hit them all. Leave us a comment as well. Let us know your thoughts. What do you think about anything that we talked about on today's show? I know we'll have some very spirited commenters, as we always do. But if you haven't commented yet, let us hear from you. Let us know what you think. Hope everyone enjoys the weekend coming up. Cade Cunningham will be in the NBA All-Star game on Sunday night. He'll be in the 3-point shooting contest on Saturday night. And Ausar Thompson will be in the Rising Stars game on Friday night. So the Pistons involved in all 3 days of the All-Star festivities this weekend. Hope you all have a great weekend of your own. And we will see you guys next time on another edition of the Palace of Pistons Podcast.